Picture a city shimmering on the water. Antwerp, mid-16th century. Not just a city, but the city. The economic powerhouse of Northern Europe, perhaps the world. A teeming metropolis on the Scheldt River, its port welcoming ships laden with goods from every known corner of the globe, spices from the East, silver from the Americas, textiles from England, wines from France. Bankers, artists, printers, merchants of all nations crowded its streets. It was a city of unprecedented wealth, vibrant culture, and defiant spirit. A jewel of the Habsburg Netherlands. But jewels attract covetous eyes, and defiance breeds conflict. The 80 Years' War raged, the Dutch revolt against Spanish rule. Antwerp, predominantly Calvinist and fiercely independent, had joined the rebellion, driving out the Spanish garrison after the horrific Spanish Fury of 1576. For nearly a decade, it stood as a bastion of resistance, the de facto capital of the revolt in the south. But King Philip II of Spain was determined to crush the rebellion and reclaim his richest possession. And he had the perfect instrument for the task. Alexander Farnese, Duke of Parma. Parma was no mere nobleman. He was arguably the finest military strategist and diplomat of his age. Cunning, patient, ruthless. Arriving in the Netherlands in 1578, he began a methodical campaign to reconquer the rebellious provinces. City by city, the Spanish tide advanced. By 1584, Antwerp stood increasingly isolated, a wealthy island in a sea of returning Spanish control. Parma turned his gaze upon the ultimate prize. Taking Antwerp wouldn't just be a military victory, it would break the economic backbone of the revolt. But Antwerp was formidable. Heavily fortified, surrounded by imposing walls and moats, protected by the vast, navigable Scheldt River providing access to the sea and potential relief. A direct assault would be costly, perhaps impossible. So Parma conceived a plan of breathtaking audacity. He would not storm Antwerp, he would strangle it. He would blockade the Scheldt. The key was a massive pontoon bridge, a fortified causeway thrown across the mile-wide river downstream from the city. An engineering marvel, built under constant harassment from rebel forces, plagued by treacherous currents and winter storms. Nearly 800 meters long, fortified with cannons, protected by flanking forts and warships. It was Parma's statement of intent. Antwerp would receive no more supplies, no more reinforcements, no more hope from the sea. Inside Antwerp, the initial response was perhaps overconfidence. Led by the scholar and statesman Philips of Marnix, Lord of Sint-Aldegonde, the city trusted its wealth, its walls, and the certainty that its Dutch allies to the north would break the blockade. They underestimated Parma's resolve and the sheer scale of his engineering feat. Supplies were plentiful at first, but as the siege dragged on through 1584 and into 1585, the noose tightened. Desperate attempts were made to break Parma's stranglehold. The most spectacular was the mission of the Finis Belli, end of war, a massive fireship, essentially a floating bomb packed with thousands of pounds of gunpowder, designed by the Italian engineer Federico Giambelli. In April 1585, it, along with smaller companion vessels, drifted towards the pontoon bridge. The explosion, when it came, was catastrophic. It blew a huge gap in the bridge, killed over 800 Spanish soldiers, and hurled debris for miles. Parma himself narrowly escaped death. For a moment, it seemed Antwerp was saved. But confusion reigned. The waiting rebel fleet failed to exploit the breach immediately. Whether due to poor coordination, darkness, or fear of further explosions, the crucial window was missed. By morning, Parma's disciplined troops were already feverishly repairing the damage. The bridge held. Antwerp's best chance had literally gone up in smoke. Another desperate gamble followed. An attempt to bypass the bridge by flooding the surrounding lands and seizing control of a vital elevated causeway, the Kouwenstein Dyke. This would re-establish a link to Zeeland and the sea. In May 1585, rebel forces launched a fierce amphibious assault, briefly capturing sections of the dike in brutal hand-to-hand fighting. But Parma, personally leading his veteran troops, counterattacked ferociously. The Battle of Kouwenstein Dyke raged for hours, a desperate struggle in mud and water. Ultimately, the Spanish prevailed. The rebels were driven back with heavy losses. It was the final nail in Antwerp's coffin. Inside the city, hope withered. Food ran scarce, starvation loomed. Discontent grew. Marnix, facing the inevitable, entered negotiations with Parma. The Duke, ever the pragmatist, offered surprisingly lenient terms. There would be no sack, no massacre like the Spanish Fury. Citizens were given 4 years to settle their affairs and leave if they refused to reconcile with the Catholic Church. On August 17, 1585, Antwerp formally surrendered. The fall was complete. But the story doesn't end there. The mystery isn't just how it fell. Parma's brilliant siegecraft and the failure of relief efforts are clear factors. It's the consequences and the deeper reasons debated by historians. Was Marnix's leadership flawed? Did internal political divisions hamstring the defense? Did the wealthy merchants prioritize their assets over a fight to the death? The most profound consequence was the exodus. Tens of thousands, perhaps more than half the population, chose exile over conversion or Spanish rule. Merchants, skilled artisans, intellectuals, printers packed their belongings and headed north, primarily to Amsterdam and other cities in the newly forming Dutch Republic. They took with them their capital, their expertise, their connections, and their entrepreneurial spirit. Antwerp, once the undisputed queen of European commerce, began a long, slow decline. Amsterdam, enriched by Antwerp's refugees and now controlling access to the Scheldt, surged forward, inheriting Antwerp's mantle and becoming the engine of the Dutch Golden Age. The fall of Antwerp cemented the division of the Netherlands, the independent, Protestant North, and the Spanish-controlled, Catholic South. A division that persists in the cultural landscape of Belgium and the Netherlands today. The fall of Antwerp wasn't just a military defeat, it was a pivotal moment that reshaped the economic and political map of Europe. A complex tragedy born of military genius, engineering prowess, desperate resistance, fatal miscalculations, and the profound movement of people unwilling to compromise their faith or freedom. The ghost of its former glory haunts the streets of Antwerp, a reminder of a time when it was the center of the world, before the siege that changed everything.